Well, hi, let's get started. Silicon Dragon Online. Today, November 9th, 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific time, and the sun is shining. So let me just say a few introductory words about our show as we wait for people to log on. We've been doing the show for a few years now, and we started during COVID, and we've been going ever since. We've had almost 60 venture capitalists on from around the world, including London, which we have today with Kelvin, and who is waiting in the wings for us to get started and get to our Q&A with him. We also have had people from Hong Kong, from Beijing, from Singapore, from New York, from Silicon Valley, and so on, all the leading hotspots. And so today we're going to have a fireside chat with Kelvin. I'll lead it off with Kelvin, and then we're going to open it up to Q&A with you. And so please warm up your questions because I'm going to be checking the chat box and seeing who has the best questions. And I'm going to read those out, and then Kelvin will get you some answers. So thank you everyone for signing on. This is SiliconDragonVentures.com, which I formed 12 years ago after my first book came out in 2008. And since then, been going strong with a few other books, which you can check out right here. They're all on Amazon. And as I said, we started this show during COVID, 2020. It seems like a lifetime ago now, and a lot has changed. But let's welcome Kelvin to the show. Kelvin, hi, how are you? How are things in London?
Very good, thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Good, good. Well, Kelvin is a partner at Cell Capital in London. I think we first met in, well, it was either China or London. Tell me which one,
I
Kelvin.
I believe London quite a number of years ago.
Okay. Well, it was interesting because the London-China connection, was going very strong at that point. Not so strong at this moment, but we'll hear from Kelvin about what he thinks the trends are today. We'll be talking about technology trends, some of his interesting deals, his own background. He's been a technologist as well, a founder, a venture investor at DFJ earlier on. He's been an investment banker. He's been an early stage tech
I've been
investor, a
around.
founder. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. It really is a lot. And now he started Cell Capital, which is investing, as you can see, in a lot of the hot trends today: sustainability and impact, digital consumers. He set up Cell Capital in 2021. They've already made 29 investments. He also has got a side gig going on with Players Fund, which is an athlete-led firm, and we'll get to hear about that. And lately, he's been working on to build out some venture studios and some programs internationally. So let's launch into our fireside chat with Kelvin.
Great.
Okay. Well, as you can see, I'm logged in now too. So please warm up your questions because I'm going to get to those in just a few, probably 15 minutes. So let's launch in. I want to ask Kelvin about what that is in the background of his video. These two little, looks like cars.
Indeed. I'm a big fan of Lego. So, these are kind of 4,000 pieces of Lego sports cars. I've built two of the four in the series. The other two are kind of in boxes right now. I haven't had time to get round to them yet.
Oh, wow. Can you push down your screen a little bit so we can see a little bit more of them? There we go.
There
Yeah,
you
that's a better angle. Okay.
go.
Yeah. So what models are those?
The blue one is Bugatti, orange one is Porsche. There is a Lamborghini which is half built, and there's a Ferrari still in the brand new box. I'll
So
get
I
round
think
to that, I promise, for our next chat.
okay, good. Well, I think this shows the technologist side of your personality, right?
I think I've always been a geek at heart. I've studied computer science at Imperial London, but felt my calling hasn't really been on the coding and the programming side of things, and so I've kind of moved down the more commercial side.
I see. Okay. Well, that's good. It's good to be able to multitask in today's world, I think. Very fast moving. And
Indeed.
so I noted that in your portfolio of companies, you have some AI companies. And so AI is the subject of the year with Gen AI coming on board. So can you tell us a little bit about some of your AI companies?
Sure. We've invested across a number of different themes. We view AI or generative AI as kind of a horizontal theme, just like sustainability or climate. Is a technology that will enable multiple industries. And so, one of the first companies that we've invested in that really leverages AI is a computer vision based company called Move.ai. And they
Okay.
essentially allow off-the-shelf cameras, including a very old iPhone of yours, one single camera to essentially, take a video of yourself doing a dance, a celebration move, and it will
Yeah.
digitize the whole motion. They digitize kind of your motion into let's say, a skeleton asset where you can then use it in multiple environments. Obviously, one of the first use cases would be gaming. So they're speaking to a number of different gaming companies, whether they're talking about Roblox or Fortnite. But obviously, Hollywood entertainment is also, a big theme for them as well.
Okay. That sounds pretty cool. Tell us about another one.
Yeah, so another one, slightly different tack, is more of a kind of climate ocean technology business. So, it's one called Plan Blue. Essentially, they use, again, more computer vision based AI tech around imaging and monitoring the health and the conditions of seafloor, right? Because that's really interesting because if you think about it, land is done, is being done by the likes of Google. We have Google Earth, Google Maps. They've mapped out 98% of Earth, essentially. But if you think about it, ocean covers two-thirds or 70% of the world, but we only know about 2% of what really goes on underneath the sea at the horizon. And so, companies like Plan Blue, they're trying to essentially democratize that information and data to other players within the supply chain so that they can make use of it.
So do you think AI is overhyped right now?
I think it's come down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I think it was at its very peak, maybe 4, 6, 8 months ago. I think people know generative or the power of generative AI, and obviously Sam Altman from OpenAI just done a presentation more recently about the power of the latest of their engine, which is amazing. I think everybody understands the power and the potential of that.
Yeah.
I certainly believe in that, and I think the more interesting thing is not building kind of an open AI engine for the sake of, but it's really thinking deeply about what the applications of using that, right? Because we have seen a lot of, let's say, the startups that we've seen just 6 or 12 months ago, who haven't really been leveraging the latest open AI kind of APIs, who are indeed doing so now, and they have leapfrogged a lot of the stuff that they've built 24 months ago in a heartbeat. So it's really interesting to see kind of the development and the progress of using the latest technology within AI rather than building the AI platform as just for the sake of building that kind of that open source platform. I think personally I'm more interested in the applications of using those technologies.
So are you optimistic about open source? Do you think that that's the way for AI?
Yeah, that's a question asked of Elon Musk, right, at the AI
Yeah.
Safety Summit. I think, from a venture development standpoint, of course it makes sense. I think, it's not just AI. If you roll back slightly when Web3, crypto, was the zeitgeist theme of the day. I think open source, that definitely kind of made an impact, a positive impact, in terms of development of those platforms, technologies, and protocols. And I think it makes sense to definitely make it open source. And I think to the point that was made earlier in various panels was that open source would always be, several months lagging behind private source, right? And I think that's fine. But I think having a platform or a channel or open source development where it's very much open up to the world, to developers, to essentially brainstorm and refine ideas is helpful, is healthy, and I think I think it's down to not just obviously governments and policies, but I think technologists to hold everybody accountable in terms of what they're building, both in open and in private. Because for all we know, we don't know what people are building in private, right? And I think we do need individuals and people within companies to be held accountable for that.
Yeah, well, there's some interesting open source AI companies coming out of Europe these days. And for years, people said, well, Europe is just out of the game in terms of technology innovation. So we can talk about that too, about your view on Europe as a tech innovation continent. But I also companies like Mistral out of France and Hugging Face, which has, I think it's co-founder in Europe.
Yeah.
So any comments about Europe and the tech scene and AI development there and other fields that are
Definitely, definitely. I can talk for hours around Europe. I've been in the European tech scene for the last 18 years. I would personally extremely bullish. I think engineering talent here has always been amazing. I think what has been a challenge compared to, let's say, the US is the fragmented market, right? US, homogenous, English speaking, 400 million people, just right outside your doorstep.
Yeah.
UK, English speaking, an amazing advanced technology market, but 70 million people. So day one, you can't build for the UK alone, right? You wouldn't be able to build a venture scale business if you set up to build just for the UK. So obviously, if you're based physically in the UK, you have several decisions, right, to make. At least personally, when I speak to a founder, that's one of my questions: is are you building for the UK or are you building for global? Let's say day one, which means several things. Are you pan-European, which comes with their challenges, which I'll come on to in a sec, or are you building for the US as well, which also comes with another challenge, which is essentially funding and competitiveness, right? So if you're not building for the US, you're building for pan-Europe, which means that you're targeting 20 different markets, probably as many of those languages and cultures. Then how are you going about doing that, right? Are you going to do kind of city by city launch, which means that you're going to raise capital as you launch, or how? And I think that's been a operational challenge, right, for a lot of the startups. Having said that, obviously English is the default language, and I think most people would be able to deal business in English. But especially if you're a consumer-based business, there are a lot of kind of cultural and local nuances that you need to learn and nail, which is not B2B, which basically is not just about the English language, right? It's a little bit more kind of innate and nuanced, which makes it a lot more difficult to build, let's say, pan-European consumer-facing businesses, right? Having said that, amazing engineering talent, and I think the other kind of amazing thing as a result of everything, right, is that there's still a valuation arbitrage, right? And I think what we've been seeing, at least before and after kind of the market correction in the last kind of year or so, consistently, let's say 20-30% below US valuations, right, for same stage businesses. And I think it's a supply and demand thing, to be honest, but also goes to kind of the appetite of the investor as well, right? Because when Sequoia and Kleiner Perkins look at a pre-seed and seed business, they invest in the founder to build a decacorn, right, a $10 billion business. Yeah. Whereas in Europe, when quite a lot of the, let's say, founding partners of funds, and I think the European market is doing better now, but historically the founding partners of VC funds have been former accountants, consultants, bankers, lawyers who haven't operated and who haven't, let's say, built or sustained kind of the scale stage within startups. So they definitely have more of the financial engineering hat on when they evaluate in investments, right? So they would be very much focused on kind of downside protection as opposed to upside potential. And I think that's one of the major differences between European funds and US funds led by those people. And obviously the mindset the appetite, the risk profile would be slightly different as well. You know, that's
Right.
my observations in the market.
Yes, that cultural angle is really strong. And we've been hearing a lot more about London lately with your new prime minister because he's pushing technology innovation for your country, right?
Absolutely. I think it's helpful. You know, but you know, being the very pragmatic Kelvin myself, I always kind of look to see what that really means. You know,
Yeah,
if we're allocating, I forget the number, but let's say, you know, if you're allocating 200 million in deep tech R&D, that's good, but it's nowhere near enough, right? We need a 10x or even 50x magnitude increase in order to be kind of on a more level playing field to other parts of the world, right? But it's helpful. You know, I think you know a lot of what the government's doing, and obviously in Innovate UK, which is one of the agencies that offers non-dilutive funding for startups in the UK. Of course, you know, I think with you know with many of our startups in the portfolio, they apply for grants and they get it, and it's very helpful for them to essentially build components or technologies. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to, right, because of lack of funding. So it does help, but I would love to think that you know we can do a little bit better. But having said that, you know that's a more of a political problem than a venture capital problem.
right. So what about the breakup, what Brexit and UK going off on its own? Has that impacted the venture capital scene in London?
Personally, I do think so, yes, and I think I would say you know even pre-COVID, we have seen the impact of recruitment and talent, definitely an exodus of European talent back to the continent, which is a shame, because we are already lacking amazing kind of technology talent purely within the UK. And when I speak about the UK, we're not just talking about London, right? Because London
Sure.
is a different country, right? You can argue.
Yeah,
Whereas the rest of the UK are very different. So you know, if engineering talent from continental Europe are now moving back to continent, it doesn't help. And I've seen that kind of migration back quite a few years, you know, back ago, even pre-COVID. Um, but I think in terms of general economy, of course, it's impacted, right? And you know, we import so many things. You know, we are self-sustaining in a number of things, but we import so many things, which means that inflation is high, right? And it's remained high even till today, which means that rates are remaining high, which means that you know if you look at kind of the broader economy, we're not just talking about the macro economy, right? We're talking about public markets, which is being impacted, which then flows through to the private markets. And when it flows through to private markets, we're talking about kind of growth stage, later stage kind of private companies being impacted. And then now we're seeing kind of much more impact on the earlier stage as seed and Series A. And, you know, some of the impact would be, sure, you know, valuation or availability of funding. There are some of the kind of investors who used to invest in VC funds within the UK very easily pre-Brexit. Now they can't because they have to just invest in kind of VC funds who invest in Europe within the EU. So that's an observation that we've seen.
so they
You
have
know,
to make a choice then.
and of course they'll make the choice of staying within Europe, right? Because the EU is still bigger than the UK.
Yeah, but London leads the European or did lead the European venture capital scene.
Sure,
London was the
but
centerpiece.
it still is in terms of kind of the magnet of let's say
Right.
technical and innovation and of course you know people like to live and hang out in London because it's a really fun place, it's a really diverse
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah.
But if you are a financier, and I essentially you know I'm a custodian of investors' capital, right? If you look at it from a kind of financial standpoint, the EU is probably, if you're based in the EU and your remit is supposed to be, you know, primarily EU, it makes sense for you to choose that path, right?
Right.
Whereas on the other hand, obviously for UK-based funds and UK-based LPs, then of course, you know, they'll choose the path of remaining in the UK, right?
Right.
So it's much more kind of it's dissected right now as opposed to much more of a single block,
I see.
which is a shame because when obviously, you know, quite a number of years ago, pre-Brexit, you know, let's say 10 years ago, the flow of capital and the flow of talent was much more flexible and easy. Now we're seeing much more of a delineation between the two blocks, which which is not helpful because, you know, to be fair, right, UK as a standalone market is big, but not nowhere near big enough, right, to compete with the US. And I think, you know, I think when I look at a venture market, I want to see, you know, US is a big player, China is a big player, and then UK and Europe as a whole, right? Not UK alone or Europe alone. So right now we're seeing much more of that kind of separation, which is a shame.
Right. There's also been quite a lot of talk about the decoupling of US and China, and I would imagine Europe and China. But what is the view from Europe about China and what's happening and the frictions, a lot
Yeah,
of frictions over technology development and superpower race? What's the view from where you sit?
yeah, it's an interesting one. So, you know, I'm from Hong Kong originally, but I have essentially have a quite decent kind of roots and network back in APAC, and
Mhm.
kind of the update and the sentiment there has been we're not just talking about China, right? There are several other markets within the world, which are essentially in that block, but essentially, you know, Europe, US are not as friendly, right? Let's just put it this way. So basically, you know, they're choosing different friends, or if you flip it the other way around, you know, obviously the China and some other parts of the world, they're choosing other markets to be friendly with. And so there are lots of, let's say, themes within the venture capital scene that are strategic. For example, energy efficiency is a strategic kind of industry where I guess, you know, governments view it as a national security um, theme or industry, which means that, you know, there are very sensitive funding requirements, right? So, you know, I think one example would be um, not just about energy efficiency, but let's say quantum computing, right?
Mhm.
If there is a Chinese investor who love, like genuinely bona fide VC investor who has a big Chinese LP in the fund, I would say the UK would not allow that investment right into a
Oh,
strategic, um,
right.
which is happening. Um, I I I think it's a shame because, you know, I think um, if there are genuinely valid uh, value add capital to be deployed in a country, it should be done. But I think there's, you know, much more kind of political issues around these things. So so I think obviously top line politics headlines you see, but I think if I just bring the conversation back to more technology and venture capital, we are seeing that as well, right? And so basically, investors who have a big base of capital in the Asian region or in other parts of the region, which the UK view as not an ally, um, they they are very sensitive around that. Um, and
They will restrict those investments.
they, I'm not sure if the government has the power to restrict, unless it's a is you know is a public company or publicly owned company by taxpayers. But they will definitely have influence over
Yeah.
some of these conversations, right? And of course, we're not just talking about the UK. I'm sure the US has kind of similar sentiment and approach as well to these
Oh,
things.
absolutely. And there's quite a few regulations around these sensitive areas for national security issues
indeed.
and export controls and import controls.
Yeah.
And the foreign direct investment between China and the US has really fallen quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I imagine it has from London, from the UK as well. UK to China, is that the situation there too?
Yeah, definitely. I would say I don't have the number, but I would say kind of the percentage decline is definitely not as pronounced as the US, but definitely has fallen. We have seen much less Chinese activity in the UK, not just across technology, but let's just say real estate, right? Which
Oh
is
yeah,
prime and very easy kind of asset class for anybody to get into.
right.
We have seen a decline in Asian investors coming into the capital even. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, people are saying Las Vegas Strip, that used to be a lot of Chinese people, they're not there. And
No.
I can say from New York City, they're not there on Fifth Avenue either. So the tourists, and also in the education field, far fewer students. So we definitely are in this decoupling, or if some people like to call it de-risking. And yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
That's
Okay. Well, let's move on. There's a couple of questions in here. One question about, do you have any companies that you can talk about in security space? I mean, security is a big area. And do you mean cybersecurity? How, Kelvin, do you mean cybersecurity? What do you mean security?
yeah. I think I'll just wait for Harris to reply. But I think from my perspective, I think security is a big theme because if you think about let's just say national security, and we only look at companies and invest in companies that are essentially have a dual use purpose, right? So we're not investing in hardware weapons, right, or anything kind of around lethal or combat, right? It's all around dual use where there is a commercial angle outside of defense, which means that cybersecurity is a big theme, right? Because if you think about it, obviously there are the unfortunate events of what's happening right now around the world, but much of the warfare is cyber warfare.
Mhm.
As we speak right now, this Zoom call might be being kind of eavesdropped, right? Not that people take value in that, but
Well,
indeed,
I have to say, one time it was Zoom bombed, but
yeah,
that was a long time ago, when
okay,
Zoom was pretty new and people
yeah,
were still getting used to it. We haven't
yeah,
had any problems since then
no,
because we also put in the password. Everybody has to have a password to get
indeed,
in.
indeed.
Anyhow, go ahead.
No. So cybersecurity is a massive theme, right? I think everybody's very cognizant and aware that any communications could be compromised. And so, one of the companies that we've invested in is called Valerian. They literally just rebranded this week. They used to be called Welder. Valerian now is a zero trust solution for enterprise communication. If you think about it, this is particularly kind of important and relevant for regulated industries. So some of their clients are obviously investment banks who have a ton of sensitive data, not just client data, but trade data, insider information even. And the funny thing is, I didn't know this before investing in them, uh, but bankers actually communicate very confidential data on WhatsApp, and they just do that every single day
Wow.
across the world, and they just do it, right?
Wow. Yeah,
And
because it's easy. It's easy to do, right?
it's easy to do, sure, you can send emails, but when it's 9 p.m. in the evening, you want to respond quickly, you send it to your associate or you send it to your peer group. What are your thoughts, right? You just ping people on WhatsApp,
Right.
and they do that with sensitive data, and the banks are getting fined big time, right? If you just Google various headlines of banks being fined of WhatsApp communications, JP Morgan's been fined, Morgan Stanley been fined, massive kind of big fines from governments, right, and regulators. And so essentially these guys build a zero trust solution for those types of communications where one, you shouldn't essentially communicate over those medium anyway. But if you choose to do so, using the Valerian solution is secure and completely encrypted, right? Encrypted to the point where if you're using Microsoft Teams, Microsoft would not have access to what is being spoken about. Whereas in
Okay.
the past, if you put anything in your Teams chat, if Microsoft is being subpoenaed by the US government, they by law they have to make available the data and the information. With Valerian, you can't. And I think people are starting to realize that actually, sure, Microsoft might be the biggest player, or Zoom, or Slack, whatever, but it's not fully secure because actually, such data can actually still be compromised and discovered, right? If one, if one had the real intentions to do so.
Okay.
And so that's been an interesting area. We obviously have invested in a number of other kind of cybersecurity businesses, specifically around different areas. One is in maritime. So obviously there's a lot of communications between maritime vessels and the ports. And again, there's a national security angle because, national security, there are many different forms, right? There's air, land, and sea, right? So there are many different kind of components to that. We've invested a similar company in cybersecurity for maritime. But in terms of other security, I think that's the main piece is enterprise, is cyber. We are also looking very deeply in quantum, because quantum, I would say, we're 5-10 years out, to be honest, from a more scalable use case or application where a normal company can make use of. Right now, it's still very much within large institutions of R&D or governments or big dedicated technology institutions, right? Who can make use of quantum computers. So 5-10 years out, but we're looking ahead. Quantum technologies where right now people are essentially deploying, actually going back to the AI point, right? Leveraging the AI algorithms to hack and crazily brute force using AI into various pieces. And it will be, it will be tomorrow when they can probably hack into something very sophisticated. What quantum then hopefully will be able to do is to essentially step change that technology so that using AI today, you can't do it very easily. It'll require, let's say, 10 machines running OpenAI full time 24/7 for a month to crack something, right? If we're able to encrypt something using quantum technology or
Wow.
decrypt for that matter. Yeah.
Cool. But it's 5 years out at least.
At least 5 years out, if not 10 years. Yeah.
Okay. Well, what about your area of sustainability? You're really big in investing in ESG companies. So maybe you can give a few examples from your portfolio of some of the more interesting ones.
Absolutely. Yeah, when we set up Cell, we were, essentially thinking about kind of what are the themes and sectors that would play a big part over the next decade. And we really still, we still really believe in sustainability and impact, especially across agri-food, because sustainable food production, food security is important. And I think not just not just the consequence of COVID or the pandemic, but even before, right? Things are getting more expensive, things are not as available as many years ago. So food security is important, and so we've delved quite deep into agri-food. One business that we invested in, again, is really opened my eyes, is a company called MyAlgae. Essentially is a sustainable production business for omega-3, right? They have built the technology and the process and the algorithm to produce omega-3 in a very sustainable manner. I'm not sure if you or the audience take omega-3, but obviously it's a big supplement and a nutrient for humans, but it's also a massive nutrient for pets and also livestock, right? Things that we grow and nurture on farms, right? So omega-3 is not just for human consumption, and so the market's huge. But if you think about it, the knowledge that people have about omega-3 today is actually, let me ask you a question, Rebecca. Where would you say the biggest source of omega-3, if you want to increase your omega-3 intake, would be, right? If
The vitamin jar.
Okay, fair enough. And they may label it as cod liver oil, and obviously if you have oily fish like salmon,
Sure. Yeah.
mackerel, that's high in omega-3, right?
Right.
But actually, the reality is that it's not the actual fish or the cod liver oil that is high in omega-3, right? It's the things that they eat in the sea that produces the omega-3, or is the base ingredient for omega-3. And that
Okay.
kind of atomic level food is essentially microalgae, right? It's algae. And obviously you see algae everywhere. But but obviously, you don't take the algae from the top of your roof and eat it, right? Because obviously you need to process it in order to get omega-3 out of it. And so what these guys have done is they are using microalgae to produce omega-3. And the beauty of their process is that their inputs in their input to the process of producing a microalgae, they're using the waste products from whiskey distilleries in order to produce the microalgae, and then in turn producing the omega-3, which is a win-win-win, right? Because for whiskey distilleries, especially in Scotland, which is a big industry, and obviously they have a ton of customers based in Scotland right now. For them, it's a big headache to get rid of the waste, right? It's very costly. It takes a lot of time, and it's not very sustainable. It's not sustainable. It's not good for the environment, right? But what my algae is basically going to them with is, don't need to throw away these kind of, let's say, your byproducts, right? Give it all to us for free, or maybe for a token charge. So you don't need to spend a fortune on getting rid of this waste, because we love it, we'll take it. And essentially they use this waste to produce microalgae, which in turn omega-3. And so I thought that circular process was genius, right? When I first met the team and actually went through the whole process, went to the site, the facility is just amazing.
Well, who are these people, the founders? They must be really
Yeah, no,
out there.
yeah. I mean, they've invented this process, right? From their research. So essentially, they're
What, they're
commercial.
chemists or they're physicists or what kind
Yeah,
of training? Yeah.
yeah, yes,
Chemists?
correct. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
one of the founding team was chemist, and they've been kind of experimenting different ways to produce not just omega-3, but other kind of helpful
Okay.
chemicals. But omega-3 turned out to be one of them that's kind of worked.
How's the
So
product doing?
yeah, great. I mean, they offtake a lot of the outputs from whiskey distilleries, as mentioned. So they have a good, essentially almost infinite supply of the raw materials that they need. And indeed, on the other side, they signed a number of different agreements, including distribution agreements for the base omega-3 products.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
how many sustainability companies do you have in your portfolio? You have like 29 companies already. What
yeah,
percentage are, yeah.
yeah, we've got 29 companies in total. I would say sustainability related would be probably 16, 17 companies.
Oh, quite a lot.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
see.
And
You going to
so
be doing more investments in that area or re-upping with your current portfolio?
yeah, no, for sure. I think we've always been uh as with any investors, you have to be very selective. But I think when you see a technology like myalgae, turning whiskey waste into omega-3, or if you see a product like Move AI, essentially using an off-the-shelf phone to digitize your whole motion, which hasn't been done ever before. Then obviously, we'll go in, we'll go in and partner up with the founders.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a lot of ammunition there to invest in more companies. Certainly, you've got the excitement about it, about the startup's technology. And so, do you think that you may be raising another fund, or how are you going to go about investing in more of these kind of companies?
Yeah, no, it's obviously, we've been thinking about that for a while. I think, the venture business has always been essentially, you raise fund after fund after fund, which is fine, and which is the more traditional route.
Right,
Uh, we are discussing and thinking about that as well, as we come to the end of essentially our deployment cycle. But if I just roll back slightly, is I think we're in the game of venture capital, right? Venture capital not purely just for investing purposes, but even about helping
hmm,
founders through the scaling journey, um, with people that we've invested in or otherwise, or even looking at various models like venture studios, where we see a gap in the market and we are unable, let's say, to find a startup or a solution in the market that we believe that has potential to scale. There might be opportunity for us to build as well, right? So we're very open to thinking about different venture products, if you see what I mean, right? So we're not fixed to just being a traditional VC investor, but I want to essentially build a venture firm that will that will help the broader venture ecosystem, whether that is existing founders who have already built, or existing problem in the market that we have yet seen a solution for it. Yeah.
right. Well, I think there is increasing pressure on the venture capital model, as it has been, with raising a fund, investing, and at the same time thinking about your next fund and raising your next fund. So it's kind of a juggling act to invest in those great companies and get them to an exit point where you can actually raise another fund. So you're constantly juggling. So I think it's a good strategy to think of other ways of accelerating startups and helping them emerge. So a venture studio is one of those ways, and I'm seeing more and more of those
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah. I think, if you think about it, venture capital is a product, right? And our customers are our investors, and also our founders. And I think, if we're able to build a venture capital product, whether that is a venture studio or an investment strategy, and that helps either one of those, is interesting, and is relevant, and it's a win for us, I believe.
Okay. And are you finding enough of the limited partner investors in London, in the UK, in the Europe, or there's lots more activity from the Middle East today, from Dubai and Saudi Arabia. Many more funds are going there to
Yeah,
dip
yeah.
into
I
into
think
the
absolutely. I was just in Saudi a few months
oh,
ago,
really? Okay.
and obviously you bump into many of the familiar faces. And no, I think that there is appetite in the Middle East for sure, and indeed the capital,
Yeah,
and say in a similar manner across Asia as well, in
right.
specific pockets. But coming back to kind of the home turf of UK or Europe,
Hmm.
I think everybody would appreciate and understand is it's been tough, right? It's been a very tough market, not just economically, but I think many of the LPs and indeed GPs, so is IG, i.e. VC funds, have
Hmm.
been operating kind of a wait and see mode. So they've slowed down significantly their deployment
Yeah.
velocity, and have been extremely selective. Not saying that being selective is not good, but to the point where they are on pause, right? And so, you know, being someone essentially who is running a startup but an investment firm, you know, you have to be resourceful, and you just have to go be pragmatic and go where the market, where the demand is, you know, and that's what we're trying to do, right? So, you know, we're speaking to everybody, not just within the Western world, but obviously looking internationally as well.
Okay, Saudi Arabia, you were just there. So was that a successful trip?
I believe so. I believe so. No, I think that there are just so many investors, right? Of different backgrounds and
Right,
sizes. So short answer to your question, yes, it was a successful trip. But I think more importantly is, you know, you know, I think venture capital is kind of the long game, right? You know, people don't want to see you to be somewhere for something over the short term, right? It's not a transactional thing. And I think, you know, there are many conversations where it's great to just start building a relationship, right? You know,
right,
I think
sure.
that's important. That's important across everywhere, right? Across everything in life, and it's no different in raising money for within venture capital, right? And I increasingly hear people say that, you know, if from the Middle East, essentially telling me that, you know, everybody thinks that they are the gold pot, right? They go there and dig and just dig, and expect something in return over a very short period of time. You know, I don't think they'll succeed if that's the case. You know, we've been speaking to those investors in the region for over a year now.
Okay, good point. Good point. And your
Yeah,
fund is only, it's very young. You have a very young fund. So your portfolio companies are not ready to exit yet. They're not ready. They're not really mature yet. They
yeah,
got a long runway, right?
yeah. No, no, for
Yeah.
sure. Right? You know, I think we've only been investing for 2.5 years. As you
Hmm.
know, for a seed portfolio to come to fruition, it takes 7 to 8 years, at least. So you know, I think people do recognize and appreciate that. But I think what people are most interested in is obviously the types of companies that we've invested in, and indeed the founders that we've backed. Right? You know, I think the most uh, uh, I would say kind of a concrete validation would be, you know, speak to one of our founders. As
Okay. And geographically, where are they?
Yeah, so I would say 2/3 of our portfolio are based in UK and Europe. Actually, maybe a little bit less based in UK. Some based in Europe. We have actually one in Africa and one in Singapore as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't have any in Hong Kong yet?
We don't have any in Hong Kong yet. You know, I would love to see what there is. I would to be honest, right? You know, if you're building from Hong Kong, you are probably building for China, or building for global day one, right? So I
Right.
think Hong Kong, very much like Singapore, you know, 7 million population, you know, it's not a market where you can build a big business, but it's definitely a very good kind of test bed for the initial phase of the business, and indeed, you know, good kind of financial hub to be based in. But I've not yet backed anything from Hong Kong.
Okay. What's the company you backed from Singapore?
Yeah, it's a company called Bifrost, and again, an AI-based business.
Oh,
Essentially, it's a digital twin business for the environment, or for properties and the built environment, right? So they produce essentially synthetic data to model out what real and a synthetic environment could look like for various applications. Could be for building planning, or for essentially kind of smart cities, right? So
I see. Okay. Well, you're from Hong Kong, you said.
yeah,
And have you been back to Hong Kong
I
recently?
have, I've been back to Hong Kong just 2 weeks ago, and it was very nice to be back because I've not been back for 7 years for various reasons. Pandemic was one. Um, obviously, the year that I wanted to go back, there was kind of big protests in place as well, and I wanted kind of my children to have a good impression of Hong Kong and not broken glass everywhere. So we didn't go back to Hong Kong that year. But yeah, no, been back 2 weeks ago, and things have changed. Obviously, not least the sentiment, the way people operate, kind of, or even the language. But I'm still very bullish across that region, right? I think Hong Kong as a hub, um, the government in place, John Lee. I actually just saw him in Saudi Arabia a few months ago. They are doing all the right things to de-risk, right, as you say, to internationalize, to move away the reliance on China, um, to be, to be that international player, right? And so, I'm still bullish, even though, the VC scene there is still not huge. And there are some funds, but not nowhere near London levels, or even kind of Berlin, or Stockholm, for that matter. Um, but there is activity, right? And I think that there are startups popping up, but I think they can definitely do more, kind of from a local basis, unless some of the entrepreneurs are deciding to kind of go global.
Right. They have to go either into the mainland China market from Hong Kong, which is a huge market, or they can go global or into Southeast Asia. A lot of people choose Singapore because it's a springboard to Southeast Asia, but I think Hong Kong can be used for the same purpose.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's a lot of angel investment in China, but I mean, in Hong Kong, but not nearly as much VC.
No.
I was just there last week, so I just missed you
Yeah.
in Hong
You
Kong.
just missed. Yeah. It'll be great to catch up in Hong Kong or China next time, for
Yeah,
sure.
for me, it was like a homecoming because it was the first time back in since January 2020. And I was seeing all the familiar sights, all the familiar places, all the familiar people.
Yeah.
And it was I would like to go back soon
Yeah.
and and have a deeper dive next time because I moderated a couple panels
Mm.
at FinTech Week and also at the Cyberport Venture Capital Forum. And so it was great fun to do that.
Yeah.
And I do miss it. But look, long-term future for Hong Kong, what do you think? And also just also China, mainland China. We had on
Mm.
Eric Fang from Silicon Valley a few weeks ago, and his view was that China is basically, and he also has China experience like you do, had run a startup or been involved in business development of a startup in mainland China. His view today is that, well, they're not doing anything in mainland China now, and they just feel that it's kind of cut off from Silicon Valley. What's your view? Do you feel that mainland China is cut off from the rest of the world in the technology innovation scene?
From the European side of the world, I would resonate with that view.
Okay.
It's unfortunate because I think if I just roll back, maybe just a couple of years before COVID, I think the Chinese growth, not just the GDP growth, but also the tech scene, it was really good. There were many of the companies and funds coming out, internationalizing, and we have seen at least 5-6 years back people coming from China to the UK, in order to kind of set up operations, right? Not just from a startup standpoint, but even from a corporate standpoint. We have seen a retreat. Obviously, the Alibabas, the Tencent, the ByteDance, they have London office, but it's much smaller now.
I
Uh,
see.
uh, I would say, 6, 7, 8 years ago when I met the guys who set up the Alibaba Tencent office in London, their hiring spree was insane, right?
Yeah.
Now they're they're pulling back. Now I see, in more recent years. And indeed, I think with some of the outfits now is essentially just a satellite office with one person, right?
Right.
Um, which is a shame because, I think if you just go back to the TikTok debacle, right? Obviously everybody well, not everybody. I don't actively use it, but many people do use TikTok from a genuine kind of influencer social media standpoint, right? Purpose. And then you have that, if you overlay that political kind of issue on top, and I actually know, the CEO of TikTok today, Shuzi, we used to kind of work together in banking, and obviously when I saw him kind of taking a stand, it's just not great. I think
Yeah.
there's it's a shame, genuine, let's say, innovation, and I do believe him. It's genuine. We are building a social media platform for users to benefit, for creators to benefit from, to pronounce what people are doing, right, from a creator standpoint. And when obviously we're not building something for national security breach, right? Of course not, and I do believe that. But obviously, things like these have become so politically driven,
Right.
and so sensitive, where it's just stifled, like penetration, right? So basically, there is nothing of this sort in London or Europe now, right?
Mm.
These types of companies, let's say, right? Um, at most, you see, one or two kind of Chinese e-commerce businesses flourishing in the UK and Europe, like Shane, right? And Timu, which is Pinduoduo, right? Which is growing like a weed, insane, taking all the business from Amazon, and even Alibaba Express. But aside from e-commerce, we've not really seen that much of kind of deeper technology engagement, if you see what I mean.
Right. Yeah, that's similar to the US market. So there was a question here about angel investors in Hong Kong, since I did bring that up. Can you recommend any angel investors in Hong Kong?
Okay. Um, there are some. I don't think it's fair to kind of name drop people here, but I would say there are many family offices in Hong Kong,
Yeah,
for of different sizes, right? And I think people have made a lot of money from, of course, real estate, but also there are a big group of family offices who operated in manufacturing, right? Which is kind of Hong Kong was and probably still is the hub for, let's say, textiles, right? For garments, for apparel. So I think there are many of those types of investors. I think, if Jeff or anybody who would like to get access to angel investors, maybe best bet to reach out to Rebecca yourself. Or indeed, offline, we can take it offline, and we can make some introductions. But I think in terms of kind of private capital in Hong Kong, there's plenty. But if we just go back to kind of the broadest VC question is, private wealth will never create a venture ecosystem, right? There needs to be institutional firepower behind
sure.
something, not just from a LP or investor base, but also from a startup and an exit market perspective as well, right? So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
the Hong Kong government has had a big um, push behind startups, and I think that they've done a good job of that. But I also want to say that next week we are going to have a lady from Hong
Mm.
Kong on the show. She's from Bessemer Ventures, and she's going to be on the show next week. So I would encourage all of you to tune in for that. And that's going to be at 4 to 5 p.m., our usual time, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And so I think she's going to have some words of wisdom for all of you. And if you're raising a fund or trying to raise some funds for your startup, hey, tune into the show. And that's next week, November 16, 4 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. And please join our Silicon Dragon Circle membership. You can see the login right there, the website login right there. And thanks for joining us. And we look forward to engaging with you in the future. And let's thank Kevin for doing a great job here. He really answered quite a few questions. And yeah, we kept it rolling. So thank you, Kelvin. And thank you, the audience, for your great questions. Really appreciate it. And we'll
Awesome.
see you next week.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.